On March 20, 1995, Tokyo woke up to a typical bustling Monday morning, but it quickly transformed into an unprecedented, suffocating nightmare. Deep underground, inside the world's busiest subway system, an invisible and ruthless weapon was quietly released, sarin nerve gas. Passengers on their way to work suddenly began coughing violently, foaming at the mouth, losing their vision, and collapsing in the hazy stations. Under the flickering fluorescent lights, sheer panic engulfed the crowd. There were no deafening explosions, no gunfire, only an invisible terror slowly strangling the air. The horrific attack left 13 people dead and thousands more with lifelong neurological injuries. From the perspective of an investigative reporter, this devastating event was not merely a simple act of terrorism, it was the bloody finale of a psychological drama meticulously orchestrated for over a decade. The enemy was not a hostile foreign nation or a notorious rebel faction, but a domestic religious cult named Aum Shinrikyo, Supreme Truth. What kind of mastermind could manipulate human psychology to the extent of committing such an inhumane crime? The answer takes us back in time, not to a heavily armed terrorist hideout, but to the deceptive tranquility of a quiet yoga studio. Before becoming Japan's public enemy number one, the leader of Aum Shinrikyo was merely Chizuo Matsumoto, a legally blind man burdened with a deep inferiority complex and a twisted thirst for power. Born into a poor family, Matsumoto was marginalized and despised by his peers, but he soon realized he possessed an extremely dangerous weapon, the ability to manipulate people's pity and trust. Transitioning from a con artist selling fake cures who was arrested by the police, he pivoted to a far more perfect facade. In the 1980s, Japan was engulfed in a crisis of faith. Despite the booming economy, people yearned for spiritual meaning to fill the existential void in their souls. Seizing this golden opportunity, Matsumoto changed his name to Shoko Asahara, donned silk robes, grew his hair and beard long, and proclaimed himself the Messiah, the sole individual who had achieved ultimate enlightenment. He opened a yoga class, cobbling together sophisticated philosophies from Buddhism, Hinduism, and apocalyptic texts to weave a flawless web of lies. Behind the benevolent smile of the disabled teacher lay a cunning mind setting traps for his first victims, setting the stage for a historical tragedy. To turn a small yoga class into a fanatical cult, Shoko Asahara needed a miracle, and he forged it flawlessly. In 1985, a shocking photograph appeared in an occult magazine, showing Asahara sitting in a lotus position, seemingly levitating in mid-air. It was essentially a cheap photographic trick. He merely used his physical strength to hop into the air while the camera captured the split-second moment, but in the eyes of those desperately craving a miracle, it was undeniable proof of divine power. Levitation quickly became Aum Shinrikyo's most lethal marketing tool. Asahara promised his followers that if they practiced his esoteric methods, they too could attain supernatural abilities, cure all diseases, and save humanity from the impending apocalypse. By combining extreme ascetic exercises, chronic sleep deprivation, and terrifying doomsday prophecies, he completely shattered the psychological defenses of his students. They not only paid exorbitant fees for spiritual retreats but gradually surrendered all their personal assets, severed ties with their families, and became entirely dependent on their supreme being. The psychological trap had been sprung firmly. What made Aum Shinrikyo terrifying and distinctly different from ordinary cults lay not in desperate or impoverished followers, but in a shocking truth: Asahara's core members were Japan's most elite minds. He successfully recruited brilliant surgeons, quantum physicists from the prestigious University of Tokyo, chemical engineers, and even renowned lawyers. Why did individuals possessing the sharpest logical minds bow down before a blind quack? The answer lies in the fatal flaw of Japan's ruthlessly competitive educational system. These elite students had spent their youth studying like soulless machines, reaching the pinnacle of social prestige while their souls remained utterly empty, lonely, and severely lacking in emotional intelligence. Asahara targeted their underlying arrogance. He convinced them that their scientific intellect was a rare gift from past lives, and only by serving Aum could they become gods architecting a new world. Convinced of their divine purpose, they abandoned their academic laboratories to enter the cult's secret facilities, using their supreme scientific knowledge to manufacture biological weapons. Once these elite intellectuals were imprisoned within Asahara's delusional worldview, his next step was to completely obliterate their individual egos through brutal and sick rituals. Inside the isolated compounds at the foot of Mount Fuji, Aum Shinrikyo was no longer a pure meditation retreat but morphed into a terrifying brainwashing concentration camp. Followers were coerced into buying and drinking Asahara's filthy bathwater, eating his hair and beard clippings, and even drinking his blood, holding the blind belief that the Messiah's DNA would cleanse their sins. Those who dared to harbor doubts were locked in dark cells for days, ruthlessly beaten, or immersed in boiling water. The climax of this malicious psychological manipulation was the Christ initiation, where Asahara secretly administered highly potent psychoactive drugs like LSD, thiopental, and methamphetamine. Under the intense influence of hallucinogens, the followers experienced extreme delirium, seeing blinding lights or terrifying hellish visions. Asahara masterfully interpreted these drug-induced hallucinations as profound divine experiences, causing the victims to entirely lose their ability to distinguish reality from illusion, transforming them into soulless pawns, fully prepared to kill on his command. Kamikuishiki, a remote village at the foot of Mount Fuji, was not just a hideout. It was a miniature state, a kingdom of madness where Shoko Asahara proclaimed himself the absolute king. Here, he began the militarization of the Aum Shinrikyo cult. Through the lens of criminal psychology, this is a classic transition from a mind control cult to an extremist terrorist organization. Asahara established ministries like a real government, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Science, Ministry of Intelligence. He sowed the fear of Doomsday, convincing followers that only armament would help them survive. Complete isolation from the outside world severed all social ties of the members. They were stripped of their assets, identities, and critical thinking abilities. Kamikuishiki became a massive concentration camp where Japan's brightest minds were brainwashed into blindly obedient machines, ready to carry out any brutal command to protect their messiah. Asahara's ambitions did not stop at conventional weapons. He aimed for weapons of mass destruction. Exploiting the minds of elite scientists, graduates from Japan's top universities who had been brainwashed, Asahara ordered the construction of the chemical weapons factory, Satian No. 7. Here, they began refining sarin and VX, deadly nerve agents. Why would these intellectual minds manufacture weapons of mass murder? The answer lies in brutal psychological manipulation. Asahara turned science into a tool for extremist religion, convincing them that exterminating sinners was an act of purification, helping the victims ascend to heaven. They tested the toxins on sheep and even on dissident followers. Blind fanaticism completely wiped out professional ethics and human conscience, turning Satian No. 7 into one of the most dangerous death factories of the 20th century, operating right under the noses of law enforcement. On March 20, 1995, the nightmare became reality. Facing the imminent threat of police raids, Asahara decided to launch a preemptive strike against the core of the Japanese government. The target was Kashimagasaki Station, where thousands of civil servants commuted every morning. 5 high-ranking members of Aum Shinrikyo carried plastic bags containing liquid sarin onto 5 crowded subway trains. Using sharpened umbrella tips, they punctured the toxic bags and coldly walked away. The colorless, odorless sarin gas began to spread, turning the Tokyo subway system into a living hell. 13 people were killed, and thousands suffered permanent neurological damage. The attack was not just an act of terrorism, but a madman's frantic declaration of war against the entirety of society. It exposed terrifying security flaws and left a deep psychological wound in the heart of Japan, proving the destructive power of brainwashing. Following the attack, Japanese police launched a massive raid on Kamikuishiki. The once all-powerful messiah was found cowering in a cramped secret room, clutching millions of dollars in cash. During the trial of the century that spanned nearly 20 years, Asahara put on a new performance. He refused to answer any questions, mumbled nonsense, frequently fell asleep, and soiled himself in court to feign insanity. From a psychological perspective, this was the ultimate defense mechanism of a pathological narcissist when stripped of absolute power. He could not face the reality that his kingdom had collapsed and that he was nothing more than a cowardly murderer. Despite his silence and uncooperative demeanor, ironclad evidence and testimonies from his own inner circle nailed down Asahara's crimes. The death penalty was pronounced, marking the legal downfall of the most ruthless cult leader in Japanese history. In July 2018, Shoko Asahara and 12 core members of Aum Shinrikyo were finally executed by hanging. Although the mastermind paid for his crimes, this terrifying story has not truly ended. The ghost of Aum Shinrikyo continues to haunt Japan. The organization rebranded itself as Aleph and Hikari no WA, continuing to recruit lost young people who are entirely unaware of the bloody crimes of 1995. How can a terrorist cult still survive? It is because the psychological voids in modern society, loneliness, work pressure, and the desire to belong to a community, remain unfilled. As long as these vulnerabilities exist, manipulators like Asahara will still have a place to thrive. The lesson from Aum Shinrikyo is an eternal warning: monsters are not born from nothing, they sprout from the very vulnerabilities and blindness of human beings.